Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4Wheel Parts. Today, we're actually beginning a 3-part series on understanding valuations. And what that's going to be, part 1, introduction and overview. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to explore key concepts, key terms, high-level overview. Next, we'll cover part 2 in a different episode, exploring more of the intricacies of tangible assets and intangible assets. And then we'll finish up the series with a way to present the package deal, presenting your valuation as a package deal. So that's what we're going to be covering. To kick things off here, though, I want to tell you a little bit about 4Wheel Parts. They have some awesome things going on right now in the world of motorsports, and specifically trucks and overlanding. So I have been paying very close attention to the overlanding world. I've done a lot of episodes about them, recently bringing guests on because it's a big deal right now. It's the next generation of car camping. It's the next generation of exploring. And whoever came up with the overlanding term and coined that and branded it, they should get a high five for this. But 4Wheel Parts and Smittybilt have definitely embraced that overlanding culture. And they've got a bunch of deals around it. It can extend to a lot of different things, but they've got their own rooftop tents. And they've got discounts on a lot of those. So Smittybilt is a 4Wheel Parts brand, so they do have 2 different rooftop tents that are pure Smittybilt brands. But then all the other things that come along with it, whether it's racks, if you need better tires to get out there, they've got all that. They've got awnings, pretty much everything you can think of to support overlanding. They have it. So head over to 4wheelparts.com, check it out, add some things to your cart. Sometimes even just doing that, you'll qualify for a little discount, a little 5% off or something. So sign up for, say, their email list. You might get a 5% off discount code emailed to you right after that. So check those things out. Let me know if you ever have questions. The next thing I want to cover real quick is our other amazing partners that make this show possible. This is episode 213 for us, and some of these folks have been with us from the very get-go. For example, topthepodium.com, they have been with us since episode 2, sponsoring us since episode 6, and this is 213. So there is a lot of love out there for topthepodium.com, but they're experts in motorsport sponsorship and website creation and also resume building. So shoot them an email or hit them up on social media, and Jeff from Top the Podium will get back to you. AMSOIL, they provide amazing lubrication products, and they're a company that runs on freedom. You can find out more at amsoil.com/rider. SolderWeld, they produce game-changing metal bonding technology, and they're ready to rescue your race. Then Crash Addict Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, including UTV Sports Mag. I'll start with them because they've got the next edition of their magazine coming out with the Sponsor This column in it. That's a column that I write, and they publish each month now. So head over and check that out. Take key topics and kind of present them in there. So it gives you a little bit different view of the stuff that we talk about in the show. Then there's MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and High Octane Coffee. Next up here, I'm going to talk about high octane for a little bit more, but I want to remind you that getting your feedback is super important for the show, for the success, for the future. So head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. Some people refer to it as iTunes. Please do that. And then whatever podcast platform you use, go ahead and subscribe. Now we are going to head into the High Octane Coffee Marketing Tune-Up. So Joe Sylvester is going to share a little tidbit of advice with you. And then after that, we'll kick off the show about the intro to valuations and what you really need to know.
What's up, guys? Joe Sylvester here with your High Octane Coffee Marketing Tune-Up of the Day. Today I want to talk about sponsor attraction. Sponsor attraction, to me, is a much better tactic than quote-unquote sponsor hunting. You want to build your brand. You want to establish yourself in the racing community and in the marketing realm of things. as a respected individual, as a professional, you don't want to just keep knocking on doors and hoping somebody answers. You want the sponsors to come to you. That is the most ideal situation for you to be in, and it's the most ideal situation for them. Believe it or not, companies do have, people that work for them, or even owners of companies. They take notice on social media. They see what's going on, and they see the brands. They see the people that stand out. Make yourself stand out from the rest. Be very active on social media. Be very active with your press releases. Try to grow your email database. And like I said, build your brand. Make your brand something that a company would be proud to be associated with. And like I said, when they come to you, it's a much better feeling than sitting there all night long sending out 100 emails. I know this from experience, trust me.
All right, this topic is perhaps the most challenging, I guess, of any other one in the field of motorsports marketing and sponsorship. So in the past 212 episodes, it comes up a lot, but do we really clearly understand it? And I think the answer is no, and there's several reasons for that. The first is that valuation methods they're constantly changing based on new ways to promote brands, new media outlets being introduced quite regularly, like new social media things too, and it's frankly pretty hard to keep up with it all. And the next reason is that there's a lot of influencers that honestly are not able to fully grasp everything it is that they have to offer. Or they may lack the skills to accurately capture and communicate all those items. So what that really means is you may have more exposure value and more media value than you even think. You have to kind of break it all down. And if you don't understand that it's important to break it all down, you won't do it. So lastly, I think there continue to be opportunities to do it better, to do it different, to stand out. And every time that happens, there's things in here that I might talk about in the show that I think are going to happen, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. Or the things that'll happen that I didn't predict at all. And all those could affect how you conduct evaluation of your program. So honestly, that's why I'm even doing this show, not just this episode, but the show in general, so that we can continue to explore all these complexities. Now, I haven't done a series before, but I felt that this topic alone had enough depth that it really needed to be broken out in the series to let it all sink in. So I guess that really means right now we need to figure out what we're going to talk about today. So this specific episode here today is going to serve as more of an overview of the topic. I want to introduce some important terms in kind of the theme of the series. I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I always ask you to subscribe. That's what I do. But go ahead and subscribe to the show. And then part 2 and part 3 of the series are automatically going to download to your phone, so that way you won't miss them. A lot of people listen on the website, and some people listen on YouTube as well. That's great. Love it. Glad you're listening. It's just harder to do it that way. It's a little bit easier if you have a phone and you're just using one of your apps and it downloads automatically. But let's start here with the most, I think I said it 100 times in a show. I'm let's start with. I'm going to say it again. Let's start with the most important term that we're going to discuss, which is valuation, the whole topic, right? What the heck does that even mean? It's essentially what value you assign to your program. Ultimately, it's how much your marketing efforts are worth. It presents itself as how much you would ask for from a sponsor, whether it's in the form of a product discount, cash, some sort of service trade. Evaluations formed through a summary of all the benefits that you provide. It can be broken down into 2 main categories, really: tangible and intangible assets. Now, I'm actually going to use the second half of this show to really dive into what tangible and intangible assets are. And part 2 of the series, so the next podcast, is going to break those down in a ton of detail. That's basically all we're going to focus on in that episode, whereas this one we're just kind of hitting on a few top items. But before I get into definitions, I want to give you an example. So let's say that you are a backcountry snowmobiler and you're getting ready to pitch a sponsorship proposal to AMSOIL. You will have the opportunity to pitch how much your program is worth to them. You'll be able to summarize essentially your media value that you provide. Likely for backcountry snowmobilers, it's through social media exposure. But there's other elements, like let's say you might attend a charity event and bring your snowmobile, which has logos on it. You might do that 2 times a year. Or you might host an event, or you might just take your wrapped truck and sled to various shows, like a Heydays show, and have it on display. So essentially what you're going to do as part of your snowmobiling sponsorship pitch is break all these things down. You're going to highlight how many people are going to see the logo or whatever the product is that you're trying to promote on your sled, or maybe it's a drink that you're using promoting. So how many people are going to see you drinking that when you're at this Heydays event? And from a social media standpoint, how much exposure is your channel providing for the sponsor? If they are going to be featured on 2 posts per week and you get 2,000 impressions per post, you can start adding those things up. And there's a way to assign a value to that, whether it's by understanding how much a sponsor themselves would pay to, say, promote one of their own posts to get more engagement, or comparing it against how much it might cost for them to promote a commercial. I actually did a show recently on offset cost, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, where we're breaking those things out into a proposal. So in this case, you write all these things down in a part of your sponsorship deck and you present it to them. You're basically summarizing the value that your program is worth to them, and you are trying to justify whatever it is that you're asking for, or maybe whatever you're justifying what you think they're going to ask you to do. So that is just a high-level example of what you might do if you're proposing something like that to AMSOIL. They might have follow-up questions, but if you have all the answers ahead of time, likely the follow-up questions are going to be minimal, if any. And that's kind of the point of this thing, is so that you can walk into a pitch like that with AMSOIL or anybody else and be prepared. So just think about it that way. That is what we're talking about here. All of these things, this valuation is something that you will be able to write down somewhere, or maybe it's put on a video, right, and present to somebody as part of your sponsorship deck. But it's a way of capturing your true value and what it's worth to the sponsor. All right. Right now, I want to take a break to thank the sponsors for this podcast. And then we're going to come back and hop into the definitions for tangible and intangible assets. And then I'm going to introduce what part 3 of the series is going to talk about as well, which is, kind of packaging this.
Hey guys, George Hamill here to talk about SolderWeld's new off-road repair kit. If you're a racer of any type or an off-road enthusiast like myself, you're going to want to take a close look at this product that bonds metal on the spot. SolderWeld has combined some of their most elite products into one small kit that fits perfectly under your seat or strapped to a roll cage and allows you to make some insane fixes anywhere you go. How many of us have been in a race or out on the trail and got a rock chip in a radiator or brake line? We have seen a top-tier desert race team at the 2019 Min 400 taken out by a simple rock to the radiator. If they had an off-road repair kit on board, they could have been back up and running in just minutes. The kit includes everything you need to work on dirty aluminum, stainless steel, copper, and many other metals. SolderWeld's cutting-edge technology allows you to make these fixes with extremely low heat and incredibly high tensile strength, leaving you a lasting fix every time. Don't be that guy broke down on the side of the trail. Get your off-road repair kit today, and your friends will thank you.
Let's talk about your truck for a minute. You can count on it to haul your vehicle and your gear to the track or to the trailhead, but I bet you never think about the motor oil. Here's why you should. Your oil is the only thing preventing your engine from wearing out and breaking down. To keep your truck running strong, look for an oil with added wear protection. Like, for example, AMSOIL Signature Series Synthetic Motor Oil. It delivers 75% more engine protection against horsepower loss and wear than is required by the leading industry standard. It provides the next level protection today's demanding engines need to keep running for years and to keep effortlessly towing your ride to the track. Go to AMSOIL.com/rider to find out more. Make the switch to AMSOIL Synthetic Motor Oil today to keep your vehicle running great. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. 2 questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you gotta check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistal of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. All right, welcome back to this episode where we're talking about valuations. And now I want to get into a few more details and basically lay out what part 2 and part 3 of this series are going to look like. So in part 2, we're going to dive deeper into 2 topics, including more detailed definitions, subcategory terms, and examples. So this is, again, just a high-level overview of what's coming, but these next topics are going to be breaking down what tangible assets and intangible assets really mean. And we'll start by talking about what tangible assets are. So the main word to think of with this is quantifiable. Like, it's more quantitative, more something you can measure and put some numbers around. I'm not going to say that that's going to be an easy thing. It's still incredibly difficult, but it is something that is easier to measure than the next thing we'll talk about, which is intangible assets. But tangible assets are based on media value, exposure, engagement, impressions. That really means like logos, social media stats, visibility on television, visibility in newspapers, magazines, podcasts. Yeah, that's right. I said podcasts, events, you name it. And essentially what that means is taking all of your metrics, and if you don't have metrics, that's okay too. This is going to prompt you to start tracking these things. It's essentially documenting all of the different venues where you provide exposure potential to a sponsor. Because they're going to be spending money on a number of different things, but when they break down their marketing and their sales budgets, it's going to be, how do I get people to buy my products or my service, and how do I get them to know about it? So they might do a Facebook ad post, and you need to figure out then how much you think a Facebook ad post is worth, and consequently how much producing essentially an ad with you is worth. And you want it to be more valuable, essentially a lower cost and higher impact than what, say, that Facebook post would be. But there's a number of other examples, like I said, that we're going to break down in a future episode. But I just wanted you to really understand that tangible assets are more quantifiable, and it's something you can write out and list, and you can track via metrics, and sponsors can take that and compare it against other platforms relatively easily. Now, intangible assets, it just brings another layer of challenge to how you measure it. It's more qualitative. Typically quantitative and qualitative are, on opposite ends of the spectrum. It takes into account branding value and resultingly emotional value. Now, we do talk about this in the show a lot in terms of like aligning your personal values, aligning your brand with the company. It's also referred to as brand equity. How much is your brand worth? That's what we're talking about here. So I'll kick this off with kind of an example. Rockstar Energy is going to get more value from a flashy, emboldened, highly energetic person, whereas a company like New Holland Overland will get more value from someone who is organized, prepared, and comfortable with nature, for example. So this is just basically taking two different companies and taking what their values are, taking what their brand is, and how you might add value to that brand. So if you mix those things up, it's not that a sponsorship won't work, it's that it might not add quite as much value as if your brands are not aligned and you're not complementing the company's brands. So they might be a good starting point. When I say they, intangible assets might be a good starting point for when you're first getting out there. Maybe you don't have your social media built yet, you haven't done a lot of races, whatever it is. Because at that point you likely don't have exposure metrics to leverage, so you don't really have a lot of tangible assets yet. So at that point I recommend starting with smaller companies or smaller product support packages by selling how your values align with their values and how you want to grow with them. Probably the safer bet actually would be to offer your services for free at first, so that you can start building credibility and exposure metrics in the process. Now, I'm not going to say that's the only way, but it is a safe start. The main risk to starting for free, though, is if you have undervalued your current media value. So that means if you don't really know how much you're worth and you're giving away your support for free, you could end up on accident diluting the market, meaning you make it harder for a company to spend money on other influencers because they're getting what they need from you for free. It's a fine balance. I think you just need to do what you think is right or reach out for help. There's other influencers out there that will help you. This show is here to help. I'm here to help. You can always shoot me a DM on social media or an email at josh@sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. Okay, so that's, I guess, the introduction of what tangible assets mean and intangible assets mean. There's so many more things that we can talk about with these. I can't jam it all into one show today, and I think it's probably going to be a little bit overwhelming if I did. So I want to introduce now part 3 of this series, which is going to focus on packaging your valuations and ultimately presenting it to a sponsor. So sometimes people refer to this as a sponsorship deck. Maybe it's a proposal, maybe it's a pitch. But it's basically taking all this stuff and putting it together. How do you make this something presentable? I use that term a lot, presentable. Like, it's different if you have an idea in your head compared to if you have something that you can show somebody and explain to them in a consistent fashion. So that's what we're going to talk about in part 3 of the series. But mainly that is what I wanted to cover today. And I want to drive this next part home with you. I want you to immediately start using this methodology and this terminology when you talk about your program. So even if you're not an expert in it, right? And even if you don't know what these values really are, like, I think you can start thinking about it that way. And I also think that you can start tracking some of the things that you think. Man, I've said the word think a lot, but I don't know how else to convey this. You might start writing these things down and getting an idea of how you might structure this. Or maybe you might get an idea of what questions you need to ask next, or what tips you need to take out of the next couple of shows. So I want you to start now with thinking about that. This is how a lot of marketing and brand managers view this world anyways, especially in larger companies. For smaller companies that don't have a marketing department, or they're in the early stages of their market development, you might significantly increase your proposed values to them just by speaking these terms up front. And consequently, you might end up teaching them new things about marketing and sponsorship. So again, that kind of goes back to my point of a good starting point might be the intangible assets. And I'm hoping that this knowledge now for you becomes an intangible asset. All right. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this show today. And I want you to tune into the next 2 parts of this series so you can get as much value out of this show as possible. But that's it. At this point, I'm going to leave you with this. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4 Wheel Parts. I want you to make sure that you are subscribed to this show, whether it's on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss upcoming guests and upcoming episodes. And then follow us on social media. We're on all of the platforms. You can find out the most content, though, on our Facebook page. That's where we do our live videos. To get some insider access to upcoming guests, you can also check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. It is a support network where you can ask questions about best practices and get feedback from our audience. And I also highly encourage you to check out our column in UTV Sports Magazine called Sponsor This. A special thanks goes out to our sponsors, 4 Wheel Parts, AMSOIL, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and High Octane Coffee. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.